Hey, good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of JMU Sound Off. I am Jonathan McNamara outside today doing a little fireside chat version of JMU Sound Off. However, my fire went out in the background, so don't judge me. Was never a Boy Scout. That's Taylor Atkins. We're coming today for an episode with the JMU Dukes coming off of a 42-14 win over Georgia State in a packed Georgia State stadium that featured a number of JMU fans. We call it a Georgia State takeover from there. Ben Moore said Georgia State fans ruled the world. I'd say JMU fans ruled the world. A great trip for all of us in purple who headed down to Atlanta. We're going to have a conversation about looking back at that game. Then we'll look forward to this weekend's contest against UConn. Dukes try to move to 10-0. And we'll have a special teams roundtable hosted by Harry O'Kelly, Kyle Davis, Ethan Ratke, and a chorus of others. We have Cameron Starke on as well. It'll be a great conversation looking at the success of this season's special teams unit, as well as a look back to the past on their careers at JMU and have some fun as well. And with that, I want to bring in the other members of our team. As always, our episode is sponsored by both the Montpelier Collective as well as Skyline Financial Partners. We appreciate all of their support. They've allowed us to continue to bring these broadcasts to you each and every week, and we're grateful for their investment in this. And we'll bring on Taylor Atkins, Michael Evangelista, and Steve Brown. Guys, what a weekend down in Atlanta. I know, Michael, you were at a wedding. We saw some of the pictures. It looked like there were some streamers thrown at the wedding this weekend. Pretty awesome weekend for you as well. Taylor,
I was going to say shout out to Mike and Dana Morris, the newlyweds.
Awesome.
Everyone knows them as Michael Wenclutch. So it was a really good weekend.
We've got engagements happening this year. We've had weddings with the JMU flair all around. Taylor and Steve had a blast with you guys on the ground in Atlanta. Just to start off the conversation, as we always do, we made it down on Friday, had an opportunity to experience a great Duke Club event. A number of alums who came up during that event not only mentioned that they were fans of the show, but some really consistent themes throughout that event on Friday night, with a lot of people saying this was the first time they had come to a Duke Club event ever since graduating, and just the passion and energy of the people that were in attendance, really highlighting the fact that we continue to see increased turnout at these events, increased interest in this program, and that was obvious. Taylor, as a former Duke Club rep, that had to make you probably pretty happy just to see how many more people were engaged, especially at such a pivotal moment for this program as we continue to really beat the drum about the importance of increased support to both the Duke Club and the Montpelier Collective.
That's to me,
Taylor. That's to you. It's okay.
It's
been a long day for all of us. Early mornings.
We had an early morning. We were up at 5 a.m. this morning, although I guess with daylight savings time, right? It was really 6 a.m. So we don't really have a lot.
44 for me.
Yeah. But the trip down to Atlanta, I can't say this enough to those that weren't able to make the trip. This is a great trip to make. I mean, we're talking about all the great away venues that we get to have in the Sun Belt. We did not have enough time to really enjoy everything there was to do down there. John and I were staying at a hotel right in the middle of downtown. We were right next to Olympic Park. We did have a chance to go to the College Football Hall of Fame. Wanted to go and tour the Atlanta Falcons Stadium, but we didn't have a chance to. There's also the Coca-Cola factory. There's CNN headquarters. I mean, there's just a lot of stuff to do right down there. And then I just also want to say, I mean, we might get into this a little later, but the Georgia State Stadium, it was their lack of fan base, which is really the only critique that I have of it. It's a pretty neat setup. John, I think you made a good point that you said it kind of felt a little Frisco-ish.
Yeah, 100%.
If you probably couldn't tell on TV, but the away stands, there was this giant kind of concourse outdoor platform right behind them that made for a pretty neat standing kind of party deck. And you could kind of look around the stadium and just see if there was a good crowd in there, it would kind of be a fun environment, especially lots of parking for fans right outside of the stadium. There was the Publix right across the street to take care of any of your tailgate needs that you left behind. But overall, I just get the game aside, the trip was a lot of fun. It's a great place to have an away game trip, and I definitely plan on making it in 2 years, I guess, from now, and would encourage anyone to do the same.
And Steve, your thoughts? I know obviously you were there on Friday. Got a chance to also get out with Alice and see a little bit of Atlanta. What were your thoughts on the venue, but also just the takeover in terms of fans who made the trip, made themselves loud, made themselves really present inside that stadium? If there was any noise made inside the old Turner Field, it was from people wearing purple.
Yeah, I mean the Duke Club event Friday night was great. The takeaway I got from it is that Scooter and his crew got a great list of prospects and people to hit up. So if you've got new people that showed up, you've got a bunch of some of the old guard that were there. It's a great list for them to be prospecting on. So I'm sure they'll be doing it. The game day experience, I knew at the tailgate. Once we'd taken over the tailgate lot, and I think like by 12:10, we took over the tailgate lot. It was basically purple. There was some blue. When we got in the stadium, it was clear during warmups that it was just us. And I'm talking, this is bad Richmond when Richmond's losing by a ton and there's only 150 people left in the stadium. That's who they brought. And that was it. And so we had it all. We had that whole side was in purple. They didn't show it on TV very much because it was embarrassing, I think, for them to show it. But we were loud. If you listen to the TV replay, if you watch the game on television, you could tell we were loud. It was a blast just hanging out with folks that you see at home games. It's fun to see them on the road. And we just had a good time yucking it up at their stands. They had that whole platform in the back, this big concrete place. You could just walk around back there and you didn't have to sit. So you could just walk the game. And so we probably had 300 of us back there just walking
Easily.
up and down. And people were sitting. We had tons. So we had between we maybe had close to 3,000 people there. It's hard to tell, but we had a ton. There was a ton of people. So enjoyed all the time with folks. It was a really good time. VJ Mago and Sydney were down there as well. That's her first trip I think she's made to an away game. And I think she had a blast. I mean, just going on these trips and hanging. We were at the team hotel. And so we got to see some of the coaches on Friday night, got to talk with some of the players. I rode down the elevator with Jordan on Saturday morning. Didn't realize, we were getting on and there was Jordan. So I'm like, happy birthday. I'm sure you'll have a great game. And he was just as humble as he could be. He said, it's all in God's hands. Hope that happens. And he did. Had a game of his lifetime. It was wonderful.
Well, I definitely want to give some shout outs. We saw former JMU running back Delvin Joyce. Also saw former JMU head coach Rick Scher, who was at the Duke Club event on Friday night. Could not have been more proud of the growth of this program, and really just proud of the foundation that was set, that was built upon by Mickey Matthews, built upon by Everett Withers and Mike Houston, and to see where it was today, you could see it in his eyes. He was emotional, he was passionate, and just really great to see some people who were part of this program's history really taking pride in what's happening today. But then to turn the tides, there was a game that had to be played on Saturday, and it was a game where many in attendance, some of the questions leading into this game was a Georgia State team that did a lot of what ODU did, spreading the field out wide with a mobile quarterback in Darren Granger, who has had success throughout the season. And we see on Saturday, the question was, would this defense for JMU be able to stand up to that offense? Curious, Michael, you had the perspective of getting to watch it from TV. I want you to kick it off in just in terms of what you saw on the field on Saturday, in what was a game that, yes, second half dominance from JMU, but a game in the first half that was very much in doubt in terms of what the outcome was going to be, because there were some moments where obviously Georgia State's offense flexed their muscles and really showed what they were capable of.
Yeah, no doubt. And before I get into the game, just put a bow on our buddy Michael One Clutch's wedding. You guys probably saw the video of the streamers that were thrown during the ceremony. That was exactly right after our second touchdown before halftime. So it's perfect timing. So lots of JMU love all around. What was the question? So in terms of the game, it was pretty awesome to see JMU play a complete game. I would argue probably comparable to like Georgia Southern, right, in terms of total dominance up and down the field. Georgia State's defense gave up on average 110 yards on the ground all season. We knew this would be a physical matchup. They were going to challenge us, not just up front, but all around. And we rushed for 260 yards for the game. We also threw for 307. It felt like old school JMU. And what I mean by that is kudos to the coaching staff, because McLeod looked like he had full control of the offense. We look back at last year's offense with like Tots and Teo. They always took what the defense was giving them. That's what this game felt like. Whether it was a 5-yard throw to Surratt for a first down, whether it was a swing pass to the running back to get 4 yards. Our joke on the sidelines is 4 times 3 is 12. They got as many yards as they needed to get a positive play. And I think that's a testament to just the overall development of McLeod, overall development of the offense, the comfort level across all of the offensive players. Like, it was amazing. And we're down 2 of our best offensive tackles. So that was really awesome to see. So many stats to think about it from the defensive perspective, but talk about lights out. And they were only on the field for 17 minutes. Think about that. We had the ball 42 minutes out of 60, and they had the ball for 17 minutes. I think when I did a play count on the second half, Georgia State only ran 20 plays in the second half to JMU's 44. Like that's the story right there. And we could look at, where were the sacks? Where were everything? A third of Georgia State's plays in the entire game were for negative yards. I'm going to let that just sink in. So lots to talk about today. Super exciting time, 9-0. But that was about as dominant as it gets. It felt like we were playing like a UNH or a Towson. I don't know. Like it had like a kind of that feel to it.
Well, it's interesting. So you mentioned Jordan McLeod. Jordan McLeod stayed 28 of 36, 307 yards, 4 touchdowns through the air. But I want to highlight the interception for a moment because that was when the game was in doubt. And if there has been something that we have seen from Jordan McLeod all season long, is his ability to shake off those moments where maybe a play doesn't go so well and be able to, from that moment on, have the best game of his career as a JMU Duke in terms of not only what he did through the air, but also leading JMU in rushing. 13 carries for 104 yards, 8 yards per carry, an additional 2 touchdowns. Taylor, to you, you've been somebody who's been really all season long talking about the progression of Jordan McLeod, but to see him put on a performance again on national TV yesterday against an opponent where there were people throughout the Twitter sphere who were saying Georgia State's going to be the team that's going to take JMU out because of what they do on offense, but to see Jordan McLeod rise to the occasion and go against a top quarterback in this league in Darren Granger is a pretty impressive moment and a milestone moment in his career as a JMU Duke.
He's just one of those quarterbacks that's going to be remembered. Just like, I mean, we have been so blessed with such a stacked quarterback room for the greater part of the last decade. I mean, really, you can even say the last 2 decades. I mean, every quarterback has come into JMU and left their mark in one way or another. And Jordan McLeod is well on his way to be one of those quarterbacks that is going to be talked about decades from now. I mean, taking this team with some of the adversity they faced early on, a lot of the question marks. I mean, yesterday, at one point in the game, there was one pass that he made towards the end of the game, and I think I pulled up that stat and showed you and Steve. I said, hey, guys, he's also the leading rusher in this game at that point. He had 6 touchdowns yesterday, which tied a JMU single-game record. His 411 yards passing of total yards was 6th in JMU history. His 104 yards of rushing was a career high. His 77.8% completion percentage was a season's best. His 28 completions was a season's best. So, I mean, just from the stats, Jordan McLeod arguably had just the best game of the season. And that's saying a lot considering he's had a lot of games, that have been the best games of his season. And he only continues to get better. But then what I think I also want to be focused on is some of the stuff that we see off the field. I mean, just the way the players are rallying around him in the locker room and celebrating after the game, the coolness and composure he seems to have, the time where he's taken, some really big hits and just gotten up and continue to push down the field. And you mentioned this game was 42-14. And if you look at the score, you say, this game was never close. This game was close for
14-7 at halftime.
Right. And I would not say going into half, I felt confident that this is going to be a game we were going to win. I don't think at half that I thought this was going to be a blowout, and Jordan has just been more than a football player. And Steve thinks every game's going to be a blowout. So, and rightfully so, he should. But, Jordan, he continues to just be more than an athlete, more than a quarterback. I talk about being a game manager and a leader and all that stuff, but he is just someone that I think has earned the respect. And I think most of the JMU Nation is just really, really pleased with how he is an ambassador for this team and how he represents JMU.
Well, and there's been a lot of focus on Jordan McLeod as an impact transfer through this program, but he's one of a number of transfers this year who have made a big impact. And staying on the offensive side of the football, the game that Tyson Lawton had yesterday for JMU, especially when we see Kalon Black go out with an injury. We did get an opportunity to see Latrell Palmer for the first time in a while, also went down with an injury. But Tyson Lawton yesterday, not only what he did on the ground, his 18 carries for 95 yards, averaging 5.3 a carry, but he also chips in with 6 receptions for 57 yards and a touchdown pass for JMU. And then Elijah Surratt, 8 receptions, 87 yards. As Signetti said, when we need a play, he's always there to make that play for JMU. Steve, your perspective on those 2 players and their continued real just dominance in terms of their ability to give this offense new weapons that we didn't know what we were going to get out of them, and they have been as advertised exactly what we thought they were going to be from at least what we had heard and seen at the FCS level. Surratt was a very successful season player there. We saw what Tyson Lawton could do for Stony Brook, and they've continued that success here on the field for JMU.
Well, the key that I see with both of them is their blocking. So yes, are they unbelievable skill players with catching is for Elijah and his yards after the catch, and Tyson in terms Tyson just loves to hit people. I love watching him run because he just likes to run into people and run them over. But his blocking is superb. If you watch both of them block, and I watch more blocking than I do anything else, they're unbelievably good at sealing and getting other people open. Phoenix is too. I mean, all of them are. Reggie is too. But it's unbelievable how unselfish. Zach Horton. Oh yeah, Zach's unbelievable. I mean, the amount of I was going to talk about blocking. I have that written down on my part of it about how we have all underclassmen on the offensive line. But that wasn't your question. He had to carry the workload. It looked like when I watched the replay today that Black went down with it. I couldn't tell if it was a concussion. He got dropped on his head. That guy suplexed him and didn't get flagged for it, and got hit on his head. That's what it looked like. It didn't look like there was anything else going on. So I don't know what it is. So I couldn't tell why he was out. Latrell, I never figured out what happened with the toe. It looked like he got stepped on, or he twisted it kind of when he was hitting, when it looked like he fumbled when he didn't. I think that's when he twisted the toe. That's what it looked like, or whatever happened to his toe. But the fact that, Magliani, he came in, ran really well. We've got such a deep group of guys that just know their role and do it. I mean, they come in and he had a chunk of yards. I mean, to carry the team as long as Tyson did, and he had to, because Latrell was hurt and so was Black. So he just continued to do it. I thought it was a great performance by him, great performance by the O-line. Remember, our O-line, it's all underclassmen. You got 2 brand new tackles. You've got a guy playing tackle that normally plays on the right side. They moved him to the left. That's extremely difficult to do. Now, nobody, Robo teaches them how to do all this, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, okay, he does. But when you actually have to go over there and do that, it's a completely different blocking scheme. So we won't get into all that yet until you ask. But I thought that was outstanding by everybody on the blocking side, wide receivers, everybody.
Well, and then lastly, we would be remiss, Taylor, if I didn't give you an opportunity to mention your favorite tight end from your neck of the woods. What we saw from Zach Horton yesterday, again, just showing another element of versatility from this offense, being able to make an impact in the best ways. And does anybody give a better post-game interview in terms of just the smile on his face than Zach Horton? Just really cool to see. If you haven't checked out what JMU puts out every game after the games or the post games, Zach Horton, all smiles, really pleased with his performance, but also brought it back to the team again and the diversity of options that Jordan McLeod has. A number of receivers catching passes yesterday as a part of this effort. And every player who made mention in the post game said this was a full team win on the offensive side of the football, and that was demonstrated on Saturday. Your thoughts on the Botetourt native?
Well, I mean, Botetourt was being screamed a lot, and it wasn't just for his 2 touchdowns. I mean, he had 6 receptions, 33 yards, but I mean, the guy is just so physical, and he's out there on every block. And there was, I can picture right now in my head, I can't even point out where in the game they were, but some of these swing passes out to the running back, these little bubble screens, and Zach is just down there. And just, the yards after catch that we're getting on those plays, I don't know how you statistically account for someone's block and the yardage that is coming off those plays, but he is such a selfless player. He is such a guy that just, he does everything, and he does it so unselfishly. And the TD lot, yeah, that was the one I'm thinking about. It's the one with Lawton where he had that great block by Horton. So again, everyone listening, it's the way you say it is Botetourt. And when Zach Horton gets that catch, just start screaming from the stands, Botetourt. The Carpenters were joining me yesterday too. So,
yeah. And Michael, I want to bring you on the defense. We talked a lot about the offense tonight, but from a defensive performance yesterday, there were some plays that obviously Georgia State was able to have success with in the first half. But it was clear that this defensive unit made some adjustments in the second half. I think you probably have the better perspective than all of us as somebody who had the chance to watch it on TV. I know I haven't had a chance to watch a replay yet. Speak to what you saw from an adjustment perspective on this JMU defense, because we were able to adjust to some of the things that Granger was doing. We were also able to hold their running back to not a lot of yards gained, and he had been a player who really had some success this season.
Yeah, I was gonna say there's a lot of talk on Twitter around postseason and attendance at the game. We forgot that Marcus Carroll, their running back, is I think third in the nation with over 1,000 yards rushing. He had 13 carries for 33 yards. He didn't even finish the game. I think Chuck Winecki knocked him out. I don't think he finished the game. So I think from a defensive side, I think it was good that they saw a very similar scheme 2 weeks in a row. They ran that 4 wide receiver stack like ODU did. I don't think they had as many weapons on the outside. And Granger, I mean, hell of an athlete, right? He got us some 2 running plays. I just don't think he had the zip on the ball. But at the end of the day, they dominated them up front. Jalen Walker had a ridiculous game, and it probably doesn't show up on the stats sheet, but he was all over the field, just dominating left and right. He was truly a sideline linebacker. And also, shout out to our D'Angelo Pons. He was laying the wood from corner. And I know I got a lot of quote unquote shit because I called him a 5'9", 185 pounds. He weighs 160 pounds as a true freshman. And he was laying the wood at corner on those wide receivers. They didn't want to catch the ball anymore. So was Chauncey Logan. Francis Meehan had a couple knockout hits as well. So they were just physical and they were well coached. They knew what was coming at them. You saw them jumping routes. Granger was stifled left and right. They threw for 82 yards. 82 yards. This is the same team that everyone said, oh, we couldn't cover anybody. I think Utah State had 500 yards passing or whatnot. 82 yards passing by Georgia State. So hell of an effort all around.
And it continues just to show the growth of this unit. And it's impressive to see that we have continued to improve in our pass defense. It was an area of weakness earlier in the season. Obviously still giving up some plays at times, but when it matters, this teams to find that extra gear and finds a way to take away options from the opposing offenses, and is why we're having success. I did want to bring up one thing that some fans asked us in the on Twitter as well as in some other comments to address the posting comments made by Georgia State's coach. Basically, straight up said not only that they got their ass kicked, but came out and said they stopped, they quit. And Steve, I thought you'd be the perfect one to address this because you're on the sidelines. Was this obvious to you as it was to their coaching staff that they just weren't in the fight in the second half?
Yeah, they actually quit in the second quarter. It wasn't the second half. So you guys were worried up in the stands and thinking it's only 14-7. I was down there in the second quarter, and you could see it in their face. When we drove it and got the second touchdown, they were done. That drive did it. That drive killed them. We converted so many third downs. We had so many second and shorts. At the end of that, you could see it in their face because when they came over to tackle, Lawton came right over and almost ran into Alice on that, getting down by the goal line. And I looked at the defender's face, and he was like this. And you could just see he just wanted to get off the field. I thought he could get them, and their coach could get them re-energized for the second half. But if you remember, our crowd took them out of their own warm-ups. Folks may not have heard on television because you didn't hear them run in on television. We drowned out them running in on television. When they ran out, we drowned them out because our team ran on. So you couldn't even hear the Georgia State people, their whole deal of when they got to run in because we drowned them out. I think that has a devastating effect to you as a player. When you're sitting there as a player and you know it's our home game and it's no longer yours in warmups, they did a great job. That first touchdown Granger hit, that was on a new blocking scheme that they put in. That was a completely different blocking scheme. The second touchdown he hit, unbelievable 2 holds. They had Jalen in a chokehold. I mean, it was clear that it was a holding call. They just weren't going to call it yesterday. That's another bone I have to pick, but I won't get into it here. It annoys the hell out of me when referees stop making calls because they just want to go home. And they just stop making calls. But at the end of the day, all the credit. Granger's a good player. That's a good team. I hope that their running back is okay. He got crushed because he wasn't expecting the ball when he got hit in the ribs. I feel bad. That's a very good team. A 6-3 team's a good team. They beat the ever-living hell out of Marshall and took it to Coastal in Coastal. So that's a decent, really good team that we just absolutely marginalized and bludgeoned for the entire day.
Well, and Steve, to hit your point real quick, yeah. I was going to say, if you rewatch the game, by the way, it's on YouTube. The next time that Georgia State ran that quarterback option or the quarterback run, they were stifled. The defensive coordinators, or as Ariel Kelly said, our defense coordinator, the adjustments that we made throughout the entire game were amazing. Anytime they ran that quarterback option out or that quarterback run up the middle, Granger had nothing. at nothing. And to your point, Steve, Carroll didn't want to catch it because he saw a running back barreling down on that option play. It was not even close. Our corners were flying to the flats. They had no way to get to the edge the rest of the game.
Well,
So
and
we're
one
gonna snap
thing,
you in half.
and
That's
one
what
thing we'd be remiss if we didn't mention, though, and we're not ever going to speculate on injuries on this program, but we did want to send our best to Jalen Green, who did go down at the end of the game with an injury. This is all public information now, as both Coach Signetti and others mentioned in the post-game discussion, that he will have an MRI to check the status of his injury. But just his contributions to this team, not only this season, but throughout his career. So Jalen, or if there's somebody else who knows Jalen, who sends him a link to this, just know that everybody on this program is pulling for you. And just as always, is grateful to the sacrifices you made this year on the field, and which we hope you'll continue to do for this program. But just all the best from all of us here at Sound Off, because it was tough to see at the end of the game. It was also really great to see on the sidelines, being so close, just how many of his teammates went up to him and checked on him in the tent. Again, just speaks to this culture, and it also speaks to clearly the understanding from his teammates of just how important he is to this roster. So all the best to Jalen. We're pulling for good news when that test happens. I don't know if it happens today or if it happens tomorrow, but all the best to Jalen. Taylor, want to give you a chance. You had a chance to see some of our Twitter questions, and then we'll get to our special teams roundtable. But what are some of the questions coming in from some of our viewers?
Yeah, we had a couple questions, and anyone can kind of chime in on some of these. Chris Ward, he had a question. There was a lot of talk about the attendances. He made a very valid point that none of us have mentioned, and maybe it's because we just never want to have to think of it ever again. That train horn. If I never hear another train horn as long as I live, it was probably the most.
Campus
It
store.
sounded awful
He
on
warned
TV
us.
as well.
He warned us.
It was awful.
But Chris was asking. There was some debate on Twitter, and I saw some back and forth about attendance numbers and how they're reported and what's industry standard. And I never worked in ticketing, but I was ticketing adjacent, at both JMU and UTSA, and not just at those two institutions, but across the country. So yes, it is common practice, or it is industry standard. You count all the tickets that are distributed. You're also counting all the people that are in the game for, that means the players, that means the band, that means everything. I will say, and I'm not speaking about Georgia State, I will say when you have a 25,000 seat stadium like JMU, it's a little hard to fudge certain numbers when you have, the Alamo Dome in San Antonio, you have Turner Field at Georgia State. I would say there is no industry standard across all schools on how you're supposed to report ticketing. I will say that I'm aware of a couple of schools that were conference mates while I was in San Antonio that were audited for their numbers because of some of the NCAA requirements. So, this is not directed at Georgia State at all, but the question was, what is counted when you're seeing that attendance number in the box score? So just wanted to address that. A funny comment from John Butler. He just said, can you confirm or deny that the NCAA plans to announce a reversal of the JMU waiver decision to deter reporting away from the Michigan cheating scandal? I think we'll just leave that out there. And I've heard worse theories. Then we had a couple other questions. We had some questions about Tyson Lawton, moving to running back one. Obviously, we don't have any answers to that other than, I would say we're more of a running back by committee. Both Tyson and Black have just been doing an incredible job this year. I think they both bring certain things to the table the other one doesn't. And at the end of the day, man, those are two guys I just would not want to tackle. I mean, I think they're inflicting as much pain on the people that are trying to tackle them, than the tackles they're receiving. So
Georgia State couldn't touch them. Like Tyson Lawton was breaking 3 or 4 tackles every carry. It wasn't even close.
And lastly, there was a Twitter question, Taylor, also about the Attorney General Jason Miyares. If we think there will be a lawsuit, just kind of breaking news in the last few minutes, the Attorney General did put out another tweet at the NCAA, just asking them once again to reconsider their waiver. Is this a precursor to some legal action that could be filed later this week or later in the season? We're not going to speculate. We don't know. But just for those who have been out there saying, is this just something that he's going to kind of one and done on? He continues to really push this narrative, and it just shows how passionate he is about the issue.
And I think there's one other question that, people have talked about. And I think this is just a little bit of getting annoyed by some of the fans talking about When will the other Sunbelt fans get an understanding of the Sunbelt realignment and how it worked and what happened? And we'll probably get into this a little later, so I'll be brief. It's just that for those that are kind of new to, the situation JMU's in, it's just 2 years ago, the conversation being had was, hey, don't plan on a waiver in year one. That's probably not going to happen. But everything that we're doing is for the opportunities that exist with the waiver in year two. I'll leave it at that because I think we're probably going to get into it a little later. But that is something that probably a lot of fans outside of JMU and of other programs are just not aware of what the situation was going into this. So again, we'll get into that later. But I did want to just highlight some of those Twitter comments that people did reach out to us and ask that we would talk about on air. So
awesome.
I'll turn
we'll
it over
get
to
to
John.
some more of some of these hot topics when we do our final thoughts. But with that, we want to do something a little different tonight. We've got some very special guests. One thing we've talked about all season long here on Sound Off is how impactful our special teams units have been this season to the success of this program. Whether you're talking about starting field position, whether you're talking about consistency with extra points and field goals, that has been something that this program has been able to rely on in every game so far this season. And it's been something where we've had success for a number of years. And we thought, what would be better than to bring on some experts who actually know what they're talking about? And one of those experts is, of course, Harry O'Kelly, who we had a chance to see on some of the JMU video streams this past week, as well as Kyle Davis. We've got Cameron Starke, and we've got Ethan Ratke. And Harry, my commitment to you was that I was not going to lead this discussion. It was going to be for you. And as somebody who many people in the JMU universe know, Harry, I'm going to just turn it over to you. The floor is yours. As you lead what we hope is a fruitful conversation, giving a little insight into the specialist group, and then give a little thoughts on what you've seen from the current team in terms of their specialists who have had, once again, a really successful season to date.
Yeah,
The
sure.
floor is yours, Harry.
Thanks for having me on. You accidentally said expert. I'd say everyone else in here knows a lot more about football than me, but yeah, I played it, I guess. So I thought I'd just let everyone introduce themselves first.
Yeah.
Start with Ethan. Let's give a little introduction. Tell them who you are.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for having me, you guys. I'm Ethan Ratke. I was at JMU from 2016 to 2021 as the place kicker. And yeah.
It's thrilling.
You scored a lot of points.
Had a few points. Yeah. Yeah.
Resident long snapper.
Yeah, how you guys doing? I snapped to the two pickiest kickers in JMU history. Nothing was ever good enough for him, but we did a good job, and really happy to be here.
And then the person who led the way for people like Ethan, Cameron.
Cameron Starke here. I wouldn't say that. There's been a lot of guys before me too, but it's been good to see what the folks behind me have done and kept the legacy going. Ethan, the most humble intro ever. I mean, you're the leader in NCAA history. You say, yeah, I used to kick. Well, I love that about you, man. But yeah, was blessed to have some great supporting cast around me too, which we'll get into. And let's have some fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think a good way to start off with we'll go dive deeper into what Kyle just said about the two pickiest kickers. I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah. What do you mean?
Yeah, so as you guys know, every play would start with one of my snaps, whether it was a field goal or a punt, and immediately off the sideline, whether it was practice or a game, there'd be some critiquing at times. That's one way to put it. But that did, I think, we all could kind of coach each other up, and we all took it. That wasn't criticism. It was more of a trying to help each other all get better and be as good as we can. I think that I attribute a lot of the success we all had to being able to, tell each other, hey, trying to demand perfection and, requiring, you don't want to let anybody down. And that was kind of the biggest thing I think in our room while we were there, was we all wanted to play for each other. And obviously we're all really good friends and had a great time, on the sidelines and won a lot of games. But whenever it came down to those kind of crucial moments, whether it's trying to get a punt off at the end of the game or hit a pretty crucial field goal to go up 2 scores or, go up in the game, kind of knowing that we've all demanded perfection from each other, every rep, practice, games, everything, that it was kind of just robotic. There was no thought to it. And it was just something that we were really smooth about. And I do have to give, and I'm giving them a hard time, but I do have to give Harry and Ethan credit for demanding such a high level of performance out of me, because I honestly just did not feel nervous at all, because I knew if there was anything wrong at any point, they had no problem telling me. And I'm sure they would agree with that.
Yeah, I feel like
Kyle,
Kyle's. Cameron, you go ahead.
Go ahead, Ethan.
All right, I'll go. Kyle, I really feel like the whole time, the snapper really is kind of the unsung hero of the whole specialist unit. Like, I feel, on the fans and on TV, like they're always watching like the kicker and the punter, the guy kicking off, but like you're down there in the huddle and you have to have a perfect snap to us. And it's got to be like laces out on Harry's right hip. And it's like just as important. And, we're up here, wherever. Yeah. And people don't really don't see that part. They don't realize how crucial that is and how important it is to the whole process.
Oh yeah, no doubt. But I mean, obviously it all comes down to what you guys do when you have the ball. It doesn't matter. It could be a great snap. You got to make the kick or hit a good punt. And, like I said, I think we all made each other better. And I think that they're still doing that now. I know a lot of the guys who are still there, and Caden and Cam and Connor and I don't know, Ryan as well. But those guys all have the same relationship we did and all demand, Coach Kane demands that. And he's not afraid to take you down when you're feeling good about yourself. He'll tell you, well, actually, this was, 1% wrong. So, there's a lot of stuff to improve on. And he sure did that. And I think, honestly, though, you need that as a specialist, because when you think you're doing well, that's when you can kind of let some of the stuff slip through the cracks.
I think he mainly did that.
And I agree with you completely, Kyle. I think, especially having such a tight-knit group of specialists, being friends, we had Clayton Matthews, rest in peace, as a special teams coach while I was coming through. And even though he had been in our shoes before, it's still different when you get feedback from your brother, right? From your other specialists. I had Graham Sharples in on my right side all the time too. And so if we felt off or something didn't feel right, or we didn't see something that we were doing wrong, hearing it from someone like him, or giving feedback to Chris Beaver, our long snapper at the time, it felt different, and it was taken a lot more serious than if Clayton or another coach came up and said and try to coach us up. I'm sure y'all felt the same way.
I mean, and even back to when Coach Houston was there, we had Sunday practices, and you just had a big win, and you're all fired about yourself, and you have to go out there and practice. And Coach Houston would stand right next to Harry with a stopwatch over his shoulder, and I'd look under my legs, and it got to a point where I didn't even really care what Houston said, or neither did Harry. He would laugh and whatever. And it was more if I came off the sideline, Harry's like, hey, I prefer it right here instead of right here. Stuff like that is what sticks with you versus what a coach says. Yeah, it means something, but when the guy who ultimately you're trying to help perform says it, like you said, that means a lot more.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, we all spend the most time together. So really, we all know what we want. And even if the coaches will say something like, oh, you need to snap it here. If, for instance, Coach Kane, if he was like, Kyle, your snap needs to be at Harry's hip, I'd be like, Kyle, snap it to my chest. I like to catch it here. If it's at my hip, I will bend down and make it look like a low snap. Kyle hated that about me. He always got reamed out. He got spoken to at film when it looked like his lower snap, but really it was just me and my long, lanky legs bending down, making it look like he had a bad snap. But it was actually a very good snap to where the coach said. I just preferred it up high.
Yeah, that takes trust too, because like I'm putting it somewhere where I've never tried to put it before, just because that's where you want it. And that's one of those things where, and I think it's evident, like any good special teams group, like the group they have right now, if you don't trust the guy what they're saying, then it's just not it's gonna look off. I mean, you can watch it. If you watch special teams at all, you can sit down and watch it and realize if a group trusts each other or not.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like the big thing, I think we were pretty lucky overall, because lots of times, like, Kane or whoever, they'll like say something like, you got to put it here, that kind of thing. But I would say, like, Alex really likes it here, and he'd be like, okay. And he would like trust that we all know what we're doing and that kind of thing. I think we were all pretty lucky. I can't speak to your experience, Cameron, or anybody else, but I feel like we were mostly pretty lucky with like the coaches, everybody trusted us to work with each other, and to make sure we all knew what we were doing.
Oh yeah, I'm sure it's the same way still. Even though they have coaches for us, we had
Yeah.
David Scon, who's another good buddy of mine, and he was my holder there for a while. And me, him, and Beaver, we would just basically go off and do our own thing. Same thing that you guys are saying, but even though we had Clayton, it was still kind of, all right, kickers, go off, shoot, go have fun with your little practice, right?
Yeah.
It's not like really structured all the time for us. So that's how you develop that relationship. But it's more so just developing that personal relationship outside of football, which is why you care so much more. And just talking about it, we used to talk about big moments all the time. Like, in fact, before the Liberty game, when I had a game winner in 2011, I remember Scon talks to me. We're walking out to the field because I had just missed my first field goal attempt ever against UNC 2 games before that. It was a 20-yarder, and it was horrible. And so
Ratke missed a sport.
And, yeah. And so basically at halftime too. And so Coach Clayton comes up to me in the locker room, and I won't say what he said, but I knew if I didn't make the next one, I might not ever play ever again. And so thankfully, Scon kind of gave me some support. He was actually sick that whole game, but just me being buddies with him, we knew what we had to do to execute. And that was by far the most nerve-wracking kick that I ever had in my career, because I may not have had one if it wasn't for making the 31-yarder in the third quarter. But then literally, so 2 games later, we're at Liberty, and we're going out there, and we had this routine, I'm sure y'all did too, where I always put my hand on his shoulder while he put the mark down, right? And I always would tap his shoulder. And then I remember he looked up, he said, let's get remembered. Let's get remembered right now. And I was like, all right, let's do this. But I was just so focused that I don't know what I said, but
that's cool.
Just great having such a good friend group outside of being teammates, man.
It must be a kicker thing, because Ratke loved all these little traditions and little rituals. And sometimes I just have to tell him, Ethan, just go kick the ball. I mean, especially those big moments, I'd see him pacing around and stuff. But Ethan, just when the ball gets put down, kick it. I mean, let's not make this harder than it needs to be. He'd laugh. And that's I think the relationship, like you said, a weird mix sometimes works out well.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know what it is about being a kicker. It's easy to get sucked into like little tiny things that don't matter, like little traditions. And I feel like I was a lot better with it by the end of my career than I was in the beginning. I think, yeah. Like in the beginning, I felt like I did so much stuff that was just like, looking back, was just nuts. And by the end, it took a lot of times just like really stuff like you going like we're fine, like just kick it. And, and you can kind of like let the weight off your shoulders a little bit. But Cameron, one of the things you were talking about, like, that is kind of crazy is like, we only go in like, like 5% of the game. I don't know what the percentage is, like the amount of like kicks we actually do. Like and that's what's so hard about it, is that like, we're not out there like hitting people or getting beat up, all that kind of stuff. Like, it's not like we're putting in a lot of like physical effort, but every time we go out, like, it's like crucial, and it's really hard.
I just remember telling, a lot of my teammates in like my senior speech, I said, yes, Ethan, you and I and Harry, we get the praise when kicks go well. And we also get the blame when kicks don't go well, no matter what. And it's cool to have individual stats, that, your name is kind of in the history books forever, which is great. But what I really remember the most is telling my teammates, like, y'all fought really hard, sweat, blood, tears for 60 minutes total. And we maybe saw the field for 12 seconds. So more than anything, I just wanted to be the best that I could be. So I didn't let my brothers down who were fighting that hard the whole time. And I guess that's one way to think about that relationship, not only with, the specialists, but I also loved everyone on the team, and I tried to earn my respect, and they gave it to me. I think because maybe I had that sort of mentality, which I'm sure you felt I'm sure all you guys felt the same way, because I think all 3 of y'all are pretty well loved too.
That's a great point. I think there was a cool question on there. It said the most memorable games. I don't know, Cameron, if the game you shared just now was your most memorable, or do you have
Virginia Tech, buddy?
Virginia Tech, yeah, that makes sense.
Virginia Tech.
I didn't know if you wanted the personal game or the overall team win.
Yeah, I mean, so I did kickoffs in that game, and David Wilson was the Virginia Tech return specialist. He was All-American. I actually played against him in high school. And so leading up to that game, and I think actually I know for sure he definitely ran back one on me in high school. And they brought that up leading up to it. So all Coach Matthews, and this is when we're kicking off in the 30, and Coach Matthews said, don't let that happen again. Well, the best part was we were kicking deep left, right into the corner. And we were coming out in second half, and the field's wet, it's cold, right? And I'm just trying to grip and rip it. I just want that ball to go. I don't want David Wilson to return a ball. He said, I don't care if it goes out of bounds, just kick it to the left. If you kick it in the middle, you're fired. And so I rip one, right? And as soon as it hits the ground, because it's wet, just shoot straight left out of bounds, right? And so we're starting to get like upset alerts, so we're getting more viewership and all this stuff. I run to the sideline, and Coach Matthews, he lets me have it a little bit. He said, all these people watching this game, and you do that right there. I said, Coach, you told me to, man.
That's funny.
I don't know, but so that's my most memorable game ever. But how about you guys?
Go ahead, Harry. You haven't said anything in a while, shockingly.
Yeah, well, just letting the All-Stars speak. There's some high talent individuals in here, Ratke. But our most memorable game, we played in a lot of wins, a lot of unfortunately the losses were always tough ones, including Sam Houston when I bounced one off Drew's head. But probably my most memorable game would be the Monmouth playoff game. Had a whole lot of kicking into a net that game. Didn't punt. It was nice. Kept the sweatpants on the whole game. Got offered a couple beers, maybe by Zach Price. Had to turn them down, unfortunately. But that was definitely a very memorable game. And then I guess just being able to run a few fakes every now and then, not when they were, unsuspecting to the defense and to our coaches, but made it a little bit more fun and thrilling. So I guess lots of memorable moments. Games in particular, I guess Ratke would be the Weber State one. That was pretty memorable. I know Ratke probably going to talk for the next 30 minutes about the process of how that went down and how he became a national hero. I think he's got some stories from after the game too. So if you want to share, Rat.
Oh gosh, yeah, the Weber one is up there for sure. I've talked about it before, but it really was like I was the backup to Tyler, like pretty much the whole season. He got hurt, and it was really unfortunate because he was having such a great season. And then that was like my 5th game starting, I think, and the ball just was coming off my foot. I felt great. And, being a freshman, and not playing is like really hard. And like Kyle, I know you know about that. And it's just like, you don't know when you're going to get your chance. And so after like my whole freshman year of not knowing what's going to happen and then going into that game and, having a game winner like that, I'll never forget that. But it's, what made it so special is just like the whole team, everybody was going crazy and everyone was around me and, just lifting me up. And so, that was so special. But besides that, I don't know, us getting the FCS record at Weber State, our last year was pretty special too.
That was a fun one.
Yeah.
I think, are you done?
No, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think
going, but
yeah, I was stopping him there. I think that whole playoff run in 2019 and that whole team and season, that was probably my fondest memories of football. So we all kind of have one from that season. But I would say as far as single game, you guys weren't there then, but the App State comeback last year was pretty tough to beat. I mean, being down like that and going in the locker room and everyone was shockingly, not as down as I thought they might have been. And as we've all said, we're in a little bit of a different position than the guys in the field playing offense and defense, so you can't really tell how good or not as good a team is when you're playing our positions. But that App State comeback and I mean, everything had to go perfect, obviously, for that to even have a chance of being a comeback. So single game, probably that. But as far as just the most fun little stretch, that 2019, getting into Frisco and all that was, I think you guys can all agree, that was probably the best locker room and most fun period of time to be a part of a team. And then, obviously didn't end the way we wanted to, but still just tough to beat.
Definitely some good Friday nights in the hotel.
Man, that App State game last year, I got to tell a story while we're on this podcast. That App State game last year was awesome. And I had a mixed bag of friends and of App State and JMU. And we were there, and they were a great host, had such a great time. And I remember, and one of my buddies is listening in right now. I know he is because he just texted me. But so we're there, and we're getting steamrolled at first. And so we're like, well, this has been a fun trip. Should we all just go back to the bar, or should we, go back to the Airbnb? And we had some liquid encouragement before that. I was like, no, I'm not leaving. We're not leaving this game. And I remember at halftime walking down, either down or up the stadium, but I saw Steve in the crowd right next to the stairs. And I didn't really know him just through Twitter, but I remember pointing at Steve. Hopefully you remember this, but I pointed at you. I said, "We're winning this game. We're gonna win this game." And then I went and got some food and re-upped, and I was going nuts in the stands. But that was just the most awesome comeback, man.
Yeah, I mean, I felt like we had a legitimate chance because, like I said, in the locker room, you're down. We score just before the half. Kalon has that little swing pass, and we score, and it's 28-10, and that seems a lot more, like you have a shot than 28-3, obviously. And so there's a little bit of, all right, guys, we got this. And everyone's every position groups, I guess you'd call it, captain is kind of talking to the guys and saying what they need to do. And, let's not hang our heads. We need to get a stop, and then we need to do this and do that. And I mean, it just came perfectly. And that's got to be one of the best comebacks in, college football history in general.
What'd you say to your group?
Yeah, I just said, let's go have some fun. And if it comes down to us, then let's be ready for it. And thankfully it didn't. We didn't need to punt on fourth down. We were all holding our breath a little bit there. And Toddy ran out the clock instead. Coach Kane's like, "Are you guys good? Are you guys ready?" We're like, "Yeah, we think we're good." But it was, we were very happy when Toddy ran out the last, 4 seconds or whatever it was.
Well, guys, part of the reason this has been so enjoyable, I think, for all of us who host the show on a regular basis, is as fans of this program, is the chemistry between all of you is obvious right off the bat. But you guys, in so many circumstances, didn't get the attention and the spotlight that we think you deserved for so many of those moments. Because, as you said, those 12 seconds that you're on the field, to me, those are some of the more important moments of the game in some of these close games. And the fact that now you're getting a chance to tell some of these stories that just is cool, not only for our platform, but also really cool, I think, for the listeners to understand how important your role really is. Before I let some of the other guys ask some questions that they have, I did want you to maybe go around and share your thoughts on the current group of specialists and their impact this season. Particularly, we've seen a lot of coverage on what Ryan Hansen's been able to do as a transfer to this program. Maybe, Harry, to you first. What have you seen from him this season in terms of his ability just to be so consistent in his craft and his ability to be really so impactful on making sure the opposing teams are starting so deep in their end zone?
Yeah, well, it's about time we got a good punter.
That's what I'm saying.
Been crushing it. He's been really good, and I've seen him punt in the years prior at Arkansas State, and he was also, let me press that. He was also at Houston, where there was another Australian before that as well. So I had known of Ryan for a while, and he's just come in and taken the position by the handlebar and crushed it. That Marshall game in particular was massive. Everyone loves to talk about how, and rightfully so, the defense held their offense to 0 points. Not talked about as much as, the defense started at the 4-yard line every drive. And that's hats off to not just Ryan, but the coverage unit as well. I know Kyle can talk more on it, but Caden is a very good coverage long snapper. He gets down there and he crushes it for him. But Ryan's been great, and they've all been really good. And it's been fun to watch.
And Camden, I want Ethan to give you a chance to talk a little bit about Camden. There was some questions coming into last season of what his role would be and how would he do in terms of replacing somebody with the stats of that you were able to deliver on a weekly basis. But he has been as consistent as anybody could ever ask for, and has really been something that fans have never even had a question. Yes, he has a miss yesterday, but even his miss was pretty close, and he's been just lights out all season long for JMU.
Yeah, I think he hit he hit the post on like a 41-yarder or something. And I before that he was like 11 for 11 or something like that.
Yeah, he was 100% on both extra points and field goals.
Yeah, I mean, he's so talented. And one thing about it that people probably don't realize, like when he came in, like I was still like early in my career, and then he waited like 4 seasons before he kicked a live field goal rep, and now he's doing in his second season, he's doing as well as he has. And, to go that long before kicking in a game is just insane, and to do that well. And he's if you ever get a chance to meet him, like he's so loose and just kind of doesn't put the weight of every kick, on his shoulders. And it's just a chill guy and just so much fun to be around. And, that's the kind of mentality that you got to have. And so he goes out and it's just relaxed, and it shows because he's done so well. So it's great to watch. And like after years of like just him being patient and waiting for his chance, like it's awesome to get to see him play this well.
Ethan, earlier this year before the season started, we were highlighting some of what we consider the top plays in JMU football history. And one of the plays that we highlighted was obviously that big kick at Weber State. I'm going to say the fan in me, I told you before we went on air, some of my actions after that kick took place, but this was early in your career. Walk me through as you're walking onto the field, as you're going up to that kick, what you were thinking and just the feelings after that kick went through.
Yeah, it was a really like surreal kind of moment. Prior to that, I think like earlier in the fourth quarter, I had like a 40-yarder or something, and it felt really smooth off my foot, and I was like, I'm hitting the ball so well, and I felt really confident going into it. And it was like freezing cold that day, but luckily we had like heaters and all this stuff going, so I was pretty warm. And I honestly I don't know if I'd ever been more confident going out for a kick, really. Like it was so early in my career, and up until I said a little earlier, like as like a freshman, I was like 4th string or something like that. I didn't know if I was ever going to get a chance to play. So, and then it kind of all led to that game is what it felt like at the time. So to go out there and for that moment, I felt great. And I knew when it came off my foot that I was going in pretty much. And even though it kind of squeaked through, which is funny, but yeah, and it was such a great moment. Like I was saying to them, like, it wouldn't be the same if it wasn't for everybody supporting me, all the guys. And like, that's the most memorable part of all of our experiences, really, is just, the locker room and everybody around. And that's what's so special.
And real quick, before we move on to the next person, I just want to make sure, I want to make sure we get this right for any maybe freshmen that are listening to this podcast, parents of freshmen, people that are new to JMU. Humble brag on the 2 NCAA records that you have.
Yeah, it's let's see. It's the NCAA field goal record for it's like 101, I think. Mm-hmm. And then it's points by a kicker, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think those are the 2. Yeah. And this is and remind everyone, this is not FCS. This is everything. This is an NCAA.
This is everything. Yeah. And so yeah, my freshman year, like JMU was the only school to give me like a walk-on offer that was Division I. And once I was there, I had no idea if I was going to play. Like Tyler was doing well and he continued to do well next year. I was like, I don't know if I'll ever see the field. Like I thought it was so hard and I didn't know what was going to happen. And so I kind of just stuck around basically because of these guys, and just kind of keeping me going. And then it turned into this whole thing. And I feel like those kind of records are so crazy. I feel like it's more about like the team itself, because that kind of thing can't happen without like years of great teams, like one after another, going through the playoffs, scoring points, defenses stopping drives, giving back to the offense. like that kind of thing doesn't happen without just years and years of fantastic JMU teams. So it's really a credit to all that.
Well, Cameron, I do remember the App State game when you came up to me, and I can tell you my wife was like, how does he know who you are? And I'm like, I don't freaking know. I said, I have no idea. And she goes, that's unbelievable. I cannot believe he even talked to you. And I said, well, Jesus Christ, I'm not that bad of a person, but thanks. I mean, that was great. And I'll never forget that. And I can tell you, yesterday was a lot like the App State game. With the number of people there was no drama. But just the camaraderie that was going on, it felt a lot like the App State, all of us in the App State stand. So I'm looking forward to going back to Boone next year. First of all, kicking the crap out of them in 2 weeks, but and I can look ahead because I'm not on the team, so I'll look ahead as much as I want. But at the end of the day, I can't wait to go back because we'll bring probably twice as many fans next time we go back to Boone. Kyle, let me ask you about the long snapper because most people don't know what's going on up there when you've got a guy over you. If you've got two guys to the side of you, can you just give us a little insight about how freaking nerve-wracking that is? Because I watch all I'm watching is for the exchange. The kicker, I'm thinking the punter and the kicker are going to make it. I'm watching the exchange from the long snapper. So just give us a little bit of insight into that.
Yeah, I mean, I've explained it a lot. I think, I always explained it like a field goal is kind of like shooting a free throw, and then a punt is kind of like a 3-pointer. Like field goal, it's very controlled and set, and there's it's a lot more. I would almost say relaxed because there's a entire unit change, right? A lot of guys are running on, and it's very controlled, and Ethan takes his steps and slower, and so I'm just not using my legs or anything. I'm just trying to throw a tight spiral to the holder, and like Ethan said, try to have laces out if I can, and just make it kind of smooth and easy, sort of like free throw, and kind of go through a little routine. Punt, there's so many variables of what type of punt are we kicking, and especially we always did the Australian style punt, so I'm a lot of the times throwing it out to the right somewhere, like just a non-existent space where Harry wants it. And that's a little bit nerve-wracking at times.
We lost Kyle. We'll come back to
Kyle.
Michael, while we get his connection back up, I know you've got a question for Mr. O'Kelly.
Oh yeah, I've got a question for the All-Star over there. This Mr. O'Kelly himself. I'll never forget. I think it was one of those coaching caravans where Coach Houston goes, "You're gonna like the punter that we brought in." I go, "Oh yeah." He's like, "He's from Australia," and I was like, "What's there to like?" And he's like, "Just wait." So amazing to see what's happened since. So Harry, you kind of alluded to it a few minutes ago around potentially running punts back without the knowledge of the coaching staff or even the team. Tell us a little bit about that story. I think you may have told us last year when we were on the Spaces, but for our tens of listeners, I'm sure they want to know.
Well, it kind of started at practice, and this is, my first ever football game I'd seen live was ECU. First game I put pads on. But we were in practice after a couple of weeks, and we were doing punt, and I just started to roll out doing my run to the right, and there was no one in front of me, so I just started running. And, the coaches blew the whistles, and they like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Well, there's no one there. So why would I kick it?" So then we kind of they said at practice, if you see that, that's fine, keeps the defense honest, but kick it so they get a good idea of what's going on. And then we were at Delaware, I think it was week 4 or 5, and I already had it was like 30-mile-an-hour winds in my face, and I punted one. I went like 30 yards and bounced back like 7 yards, 23-yard punt. And I was like, well, that's pretty miserable. And I had the green light from Coach Houston if we were inside our 40-yard line. So way down the field. My heels were at my 4-yard line, and that wind was in my face again. We're up by 3. I didn't know I was like, if there's no one there, I'm going, because I don't want to kick it in this wind. Thankfully, there was no one there, and I saw the marker, and I went straight for that marker. Ran off. Everyone was kind of happy. Coach Houston goes, if you didn't make that, I would send you on a submarine home. So, yeah, well, I made it. Then he had the press conference. He's like, "Yeah, we've been working on that one for a while." Huh, that's funny. Then I got invited to his house for dinner that night, that week, because it was the bye week. So, but Houston and I had a good relationship, and then from then on, it was if it's there, go, which ultimately led to the national championship one, North Dakota State. They were bringing a linebacker over to the right side to try and stop that and rush my kicking side, and we kind of saw that during the week. And it was 3 minutes to go, and they were doing that all game. So Coach Houston said, if you go out there and they're lined up like that, call whatever the name of that fake was. And we called it out in the field in the huddle, and Liam Finado laid a pretty good block. So that was the origin of the fake.
Man, what a moment. Cameron, I want to get to you for a second, but Kyle, I want to give you a chance to finish your remarks because I know you got cut off with your internet, but I don't know if you know when you got cut off, but want to give you a chance to finish your remarks to Steve.
Yeah, I think I finished up field goal, and then I was just saying punt. There's so many more factors with the different types, and obviously someone's coming to hit me, and I'm supposed to try to go make a tackle, which I did sparingly. But there were times that it's just so different, and you gotta really focus on your job first. It's like I always broke it up into two things. The first is just a snap, like these guys have all talked about. It's just doing your job, whether there's no one there, it's at practice, or it's during the game, and then after that, then you just going and playing football after that, and that's what makes it tough. And that's what I always tried to, teach Caden, which I think Harry alluded to earlier with how well he's doing in coverage. There's so many fair catches, and he gets down the field quick, and he's learned like a sponge since he first got there. The first thing I think he said to me was like, "I just am so excited to learn from you guys." And Harry and Ethan, he was learning from them too, and he's been doing a great job, and all of them doing a great job. So it's been fun to watch.
Awesome. Cameron, so my question for you though is you guys beat Virginia Tech. Take us inside the trip back to Harrisonburg and what it was like when you got on campus, because that was something that was going on in kind of the text threads between a lot of us. Was like, man, what that atmosphere must have been like, what that celebration was like, whether it's on the bus, the locker room, but also when you step back on campus, because we all saw some of the videos of students kind of rushing to the quad in different places. Just take us into that afternoon.
Yeah, well, one thing before I go into that, I want to talk about leading up to the game. I'll tell a quick story.
Yeah.
Is in the hotel the night before, we all think that we have a chance to beat anybody, right? But when this game is coming up on the schedule, it's like, okay, we understand why they chose us to come here, right? But the preparation leading up to that season was different, and it felt different. And I remember going to the team meeting the night before, and Mickey kind of just paced back. He didn't say anything. He paced back and forth for a little bit. He always kind of look up in the stand, or look up into the sky, like, men, this is why we're going to win tomorrow. And he starts to list off everything. He said, they're coming off a short week. They're not looking at us. They're looking towards next week. It's going to be raining. We're going to win the turnover battle. We're going to make them fumble, and we're going to run the pistol and show them things they've never seen before. And that's all he said. He told us that we were going to win. And so that kind of actually lit a little bit of a spark more so to get up and play this game the next day, even though it was cold and rainy and, all that good stuff. But the energy was different. And we had such a fun group of guys on all positions. Mike, I know you knew several of them, and they all were key contributors and great dudes. So yes, we would joke and crack up, but I remember going into that game and running out of the tunnel, and I ran out of the tunnel at West Virginia where I redshirted too. And it was loud there, but running out of the tunnel at Lane Stadium, I remember the boos were so powerful that your vision vibrated. And you're trying to, you look at the scoreboard across the field, it's like you couldn't focus. It was wild. But once we started, that snowball, we knew that we were going to win that game. And going back into the locker room, there's a snippet of that on YouTube, and we were just going crazy. And we all were so pumped. And yes, we were getting videos sent to our phone of all the students, just running around campus. And, as we showed up on the buses, there were folks waiting there for us lined up. And then, of course, when you get back to the apartment, there's folks waiting for you, and there's plenty of kegs and stuff to be around. So many activities that we were all personally invited to, of course. But I remember the bus ride back, us just going insane. Like, we didn't know really how to contain our happiness that what we had just pulled off, and just having that support. That's kind of really where I felt the fandom really started to snowball into what it is today. Yes, the 04 championship, 08 was great, and then the App State game that year, and just things leading up to that. But that was kind of the moment where the JMU brand really started to go nationwide, I'd say, and it hadn't really looked back since. And so it's been awesome.
Awesome. Well, guys, I hope you found this as enjoyable as we did as a group, because again, like, one thing we've tried to do with this platform is give former players a voice and bring you back into the conversation, not only as a way to say thank you for what you gave in terms of your contributions to the program, but also to continue to educate this fan base, to give a little insight into what kind of drives all of you and maybe some of the behind the scenes stories. So on behalf of all of us at Sound Off, thank you. And we hope we can do this again, because again, all the specialists, the holders, I know Joe Shoker just asked us to give a shout out to the holders. There's so many pieces and moving parts that make a successful kick or make a successful punt. And you guys put a lot of work in that probably the average fan doesn't understand. So thanks again, and we wish you all the best. And we hope that you guys come back and get the chance to see you at some games as we get towards the end of the season and as we go forward in the years to come. So thanks, guys, all around.
Thanks, guys.
We appreciate it.
Thanks,
and with that,
awesome.
We are going to turn our attention to this week's game as we look forward to JMU's next opponent, which is UConn. And want to start kind of as we go around and talk about this game, guys. This would be one of those games where I think maybe the average fan could say, we're going to look past it and look to App State. But this is a team that's given some teams some fits this year. And I want to start with you, Michael, because I know you've looked into this team a little bit more. Kind of your thoughts on what fans will expect to see when we go into Bridgeforth on Saturday, a game. First game in a while, not on national TV, an ESPN Plus game, but it is sold out. Expecting a big crowd in Harrisonburg.
Yeah, I was going to say, I know it graduated a long time ago or 10 years ago, but to say that we have a sold out Bridgeforth for a 1-8 football team is pretty awesome. So I think we should celebrate that. But this 1-8 football team has also had 6 out of their 8 games were decided in one possession. So I think they lost to Utah State by 1 point. They obviously ran into a juggernaut last week in Tennessee, but they lost to Boston College by 7, lost to South Florida by 3, and they beat Rice by 7, and then they lost to FIU by 7 points. We did have one common opponent with Georgia State who beat them by 21 for what it's worth. We all know what just happened this last weekend, but at the end of the day, it's a UConn team with nothing to lose. It's a Jim Mora coach team. He's proud of what he's built over there. We've lost some recruiting matches to them over the years since he's been there, and they've been trying to rebuild that ship. But I think you could expect they're not going to be running 4 wideouts and stack formation like the last 2 opponents. They're going to look a lot like us in terms of the zone option, shotgun spread, but we're going to need a loud Bridgeforth. And I think it's a team that if we don't put them away early, when I say early, before halftime, hell, let's get a 2-score lead in the first quarter, they are going to stick around because they have nothing to lose, and they know it.
Steve, when you look at this game in this matchup, the opportunity to continue the national narrative, continue the build-up and the America's team and all that's happening, that's there because this team continues to win, continues to be in the conversation, pushing for a waiver to give this team the right to play in a Sun Belt championship and to potentially play in something more. How do you see this game and the importance of continuing what our end goal is to continue this ride as long as it will go and to give this opportunity to this team an opportunity to make this season even more special than it's already been?
They're going to be a tough out. 27-point favorite is just flat out wrong. I think it's way too high. They're well coached. They've got good playmakers. If you look back at last year's Myrtle Beach Bowl when they played Marshall, that was a good Marshall team, and they hung with Marshall the entire game. They made some mistakes, which ultimately did them in. We have to go into that, and we will. completely focused, and we actually need to just lay the absolute smackdown on them. And I'm not putting hyperbole. I'll do that next in my closing thing. This one we have to, as a statement game, roll them hard and quick, because everybody's watching. Everybody in the nation's watching. They're going to be, it's on the crawler. They're going to want to make sure that we are who we say we are. And so next week, the whole theme of this week, if I were the coach, is we are who we say we are. And we're going to show these guys on Saturday who we are in front of a packed Bridgeforth Stadium. It may not be a 27-point win, but it's going to be a decisive beatdown, and it has to be. And this is a really good team. Everybody's going to say they're 1-8. Why in the world do we care? Blah, blah, blah. It's the best 1-8 team we'll play by far. And I think people will be surprised how good they are. That is a very well gap sound will be shocked. People will be shocked how gap sound they are. They can run the ball, and they're going to try to run the ball, and they may have some success. I don't know that they will for long. They may have one or two plays that they put in. But at the end of the day, that's a very good team, and I'm expecting for our national brand, we're going to have to really keep the pedal to the metal on them. They will not quit. They'll play all 60 minutes. You will not see quit in them at all. So, they're not going to tap out. If we have to impose our will on them, but they're not going to tap. They're a good team.
I will say this: if there is a concern going into this game now we're going to really start to continue to test the depth of this program. Obviously, there is potential for some, if there is injuries on the defensive line, to see some new defensive linemen have to step up into more important roles. Signetti, in his post-game comments, said we're banged up at running back. Will Luttrell be able to go? Will Kalon be able to go this week? Is Tyson going to have to continue to carry the lion's share of the carries, but are we going to see some of these other younger backs get their moment? Taylor, I'm just curious on that specific topic in terms of now we're getting to the time of the season where not only is JMU really starting to have to bring in some additional players who may have not contributed earlier, but some of our opponents are as well. I'm just curious your thoughts on that area of this matchup on Saturday.
I don't know if it's, I do know it's our coaching staff, and I do know it's just the next man up mentality. I mean, we lost two key players in our first game against Bucknell, one on the defensive line, lost Solomon Van Horst. We lost Ukwu prior to the season starting with the transfer portal. We've lost our two best offensive linemen. We don't know where this injury with Jalen Green is going to go. And yet we continue to outperform ourselves each game. And so, it's not that I don't think the loss of some of these players or the potential loss of a player will not be felt. It absolutely will. I mean, the people that we're talking about are some of the biggest names on the team. But at the same time, we have a system and a scheme that seems to be we're able to coach the players that are in the position to play to the level that JMU is expected to play. And I do just want to kind of harp real quick on some of the points that Michael made. Not only is this UConn team been a one-score game with a lot of their losses, the Rice team that they beat is one of the better teams in the American Athletic. I mean, they had a close – they lost by 2 to Tulane. They almost beat SMU. I know UTSA is going in there next week, and I know that's not a game they're overlooking. So this UConn team is sneaky. They have nothing to lose. And I think the biggest thing for JMU is we're not just looking to be the kings of the East again, because we've done that. We're not looking just to be the kings of the Commonwealth. We are. This team is looking to go 12-0, and they're looking to show the entire country that we are one of the best teams, not in the Sun Belt, not in the G5, but one of the best teams in the country. And UConn is in the way of getting that done. And so I expect this team to come out just as fired up as they have for any other game this year.
And just to circle back on Steve's point and just to bring it home, people have to remember UConn is a national brand. I think that's really important for a couple things. When they see UConn, for the casual fan, that's going to look like a big deal, right? They're not going to know they're 1-8 for the casual fan. They're going to go, oh, JMU plays UConn? Like, I had no idea. I've had so many people say, like, oh, that's a big game. My father goes, that's the game I want to go to, because he knows UConn's a brand. So I think it's important, right? When we play this game, this program was just in the Fiesta Bowl, I think not even a decade ago. Yeah. This will be a huge win, not for the program, not for take out all the stats out the window, but for the national brand of how we're going to be perceived to everyone. Back to Taylor's point, right? So huge game, certainly some trap game mentality, but this is a game that's going to define JMU and put us on the map in the sense of, making sure that everyone in every room, every TV room watching knows who we are.
Well, guys, turning our attention now to our final thoughts segment. There's a lot of different ways we can go to this, and we'll give Steve the opportunity to go last per usual. But I know, Taylor, I want to go to you for something that we talked about on the flights and in some of the tailgate conversations. This is a moment for our fan base to, I know there's been some conversation online of should we talk about this? Should we not talk about this? If we talk about it, is it going to jinx what happens on the field? We're both in the camp of that. These types of seasons, undefeated runs where you get the wins that this team has in the fashion that they have, are rare. It is not outside the box to say we may never see another run like this in our lifetime as fans. I wanted you to share just your perspective on why it is more than okay for the average JMU fan to advocate passionately and to go out and do everything that they see in an appropriate manner. And obviously we're not talking any threats or types of things online, but to passionately and loudly advocate for the student athletes, like the ones we just had on this podcast, who give so much, who, as we saw in yesterday's game, you never know when you're going to get injured. They're never going to get this moment again. Just your thoughts on why it's okay for fans to make this a moment and give this chance for this program to go as far as they can go.
Well, Steve Brown has made the term arbitrary and capricious a household name. I mean, we might need to make a shirt called arbitrary and capricious. But the reason I bring that up is there's over 20,000 students at JMU. There's 25,000 people in the stands on a given Saturday at JMU. There's over 100,000 alumni. And then when you factor in just the community, the JMU community, the Shenandoah Valley, you're talking about over 100,000 people with different perspectives on how they look at this. And why I think it's so important for the JMU fan base to continue to be vocal about this is because everyone's perception is unique and everyone brings something to the table. And when you get a perspective like arbitrary and capricious that everyone kind of latches onto and says, hey, that's a really good argument, you kind of get that momentum going. The reason the national media is talking about this, the reason a lot of our state legislatures are talking about this is because they see a fan base that this matters to. And a lot of times you might hear, some media figures or something kind of downplay the role of the fan base and that fans really don't make a difference. No, fans make an incredible difference. And you remember at App State last year when Todd Centeio in the press conference said how much it meant to him when he looked up into the stands and saw the purple cheering. I know Matt Costner even mentioned on a tweet earlier with JMU Athletics, looking up at the sideline, he said, I'm continue to be so impressed at how well the JMU fan base travels. And there is a role that the JMU fan base has to play. And just like there's appropriate and inappropriate ways to cheer in the stands, there's appropriate and inappropriate ways to make this argument, either privately with personal conversations or publicly on social media, or like we saw some fans doing, handwriting letters to the NCAA, which I 100% endorse. I mean, any creative or unique way you feel you want to make this case, do it. But what I want everyone to think about right now, we're 10 weeks into the season. We're 9-0. John, you made the point that this may be a moment we never get to live again. I want everyone to think about the excitement leading up to this season, the excitement that they've had in every game, every drink that they've shared, every road trip that they've made, every streamer they've thrown in the stands, just the overall excitement, and more than just the game itself. We've talked about, how much this game how much what this program is accomplishing is so much more than a football game. There was an economic study done at UTSA while I was there, and I went to look it up before the broadcast today. UTSA has a $2.5 billion economic impact on the city of San Antonio. Now, that's a metro region much, much larger than the Shenandoah Valley and Harrisonburg. But when you're talking about JMU's football program being able to do this, it's giving our fan base an opportunity to have these moments and these memories that we cannot guarantee will come again. You have the networking opportunities that come with it, but you also have just the economic impact. You're the front porch of the university. You get to be an ambassador to the entire country of the Western Virginia region, the Shenandoah Valley. I mean, there is so much that what this team is doing on the field is allowing JMU as a program and as a university and as a region to really do. And so that's what I say when we're talking about the opportunity to step up and invest, whether with the Duke Club, with the Montpelier Collective, everyone has a role to play in that. And for those of you that are, maybe just out of school and you have student loans and you're living paycheck to paycheck, I don't think anyone is asking of you to stroke a big check, but even something as small as $10, $25, $50 just to be engaged. Because here's the thing is, if you wait until quote unquote, you can afford to give, that might be 10 or 20 years from now. And I don't see a lot of people turning around after 20 years of not being engaged with something to turn around and all of a sudden re-engage with something they've completely checked out from for the last 2 decades. So, and to those of you that, and there's people that are listening here that have been some of JMU's biggest supporters for the last couple of decades. I want to say to those people, thank you for allowing us to get to this point. But in the conversations and the reconnecting with fraternity brothers and people you went to school with, this is the opportunity to reach out to them and say, listen, I've stepped up. I'm willing to continue to step up even more, but we really need to get you on board because of all the opportunities I just spoke about. So I'm trying not to go too long and ramble here, but again, I just really want to emphasize when we're arguing for these waivers, when we're arguing for this opportunity for JMU to have what they've earned on the field, we're arguing for so much more than just bragging rights and points on the scoreboard. I want to do it for the players. I want to do it for the coaches, and I want to do it for the entire JMU community.
I think it's great. So well said, Taylor, because we had our private conversation with Skyline Financial Partners a couple of weeks ago where we did their special episode. And as part of that, we talked about the impact of the run for UMBC. I'm somebody who lives in Richmond and seeing the run that VCU went on and what that did for not only VCU athletics, but for the entire university that in the community and the pride and student application. So the next time somebody tells you, well, we knew the rules, or the next time somebody says, well, we'll get another opportunity next year when we're eligible, it's not guaranteed. Injuries, the other teams that are playing you, who they get in the transfer portal and other factors that one kick goes off an upright and we lose a game, and it changes the fabric of so much of what happens. This moment is special. And I think your point is so spot on because it means so much more to not only these players, again, who may never get this opportunity again, but what it means to the broader university community, what it means for engaged alumni who might write a check or sign up for season tickets. What is that going to do for the momentum and the push to try to get the stadium built on the other side? These things are all connected. And I've seen some comments from some other fan bases who said, enjoy this now because maybe they had their moment in the sun and then went through 5 or 10 years where they didn't have success. So that's why I feel like we should all be very proud of this topic and be very willing to go as far as it needs to continue to try to get people to rally around this cause and to get people to sign on to helping this university, right the right. And as Jason Miura said, do the right thing, take the easy win to the NCAA. And I hope cooler heads prevail. And maybe there is maybe not the stubbornness that we've seen in this topic, and maybe people do the right thing by the student athletes. Michael, your final thoughts.
I think at the end of the day, right, like, I look at my position, being such a advocate for JMU over the years, like, we need to all do our part. I think that's what it is. Like, we have to all do our part, whether it's financially thinking about giving back to the program that we love so much about, or letting people know where we are, right? Like, I think the beauty of being in the Sun Belt is we're around other programs that care. And it's pretty awesome to see that. Like, when you tweet out, I don't know, like, we're the kings of the East, someone's going to shout back at you. And that hasn't happened for a long time. And it's a lot of fun. And we get a lot of connections. And I guarantee if you meet a lot of these people face to face in a bar, you're going to be really good friends. And we want to keep that going. So as Brooke Boyd, as you can see on the screen, every little donation helps. And whether it's to obviously the Duke Club first, number 2 being obviously the NIL Collective, Montpelier Collective. Sounds like the last home game was an amazing rally. Let's do it again this Saturday. So if you care about this team and if you care about the program, and if you're truly passionate about the success and more importantly, the scalability of it, this is a great opportunity to make a huge impact. I found this out this past weekend. I was getting coffee with our Duke Club rep. You might remember how hot it was at the UVA game and how it was a noon kickoffs. The players had tents on the field. and it was able to keep them cool and obviously shade some of the sun away, that's because of people like you, the donors. That was provided by them. And so when you think about, oh, well, my $10 is not much, $5 is not going to do anything, you just never know. And if you're passionate and you believe in something, pursue it. Steve, I know Steve's ready to rock and roll, so I feel like I'm holding him back.
All right, Steve, let me get a chance to get the rest of us off the screen so you can have the full screen to yourself. But Steve, as I always say, the floor is yours, my friend.
Well, tonight I'm going to be channeling the Macho Man Randy Savage. Ooh, yeah, UConn Huskies. You say you don't know where JMU's coming from? It's mind-boggling to you? Oh, yeah. How can JMU be in year 2 of FBS and make it to the top of the mountain? Well, this Saturday, you'll know where JMU is, brother. UConn, you're standing in the way of JMU getting to 10-0. And no one, not the Sun Belt, not the NCAA, is standing in the way of JMU in 2023. The Sun Belt Championship runs through Harrisonburg to be legitimate. Anything else is a fraud, and you know it. UConn, welcome to the kingdom of madness and chaos at Bridgeport Stadium. Watch whatever film you want. Do whatever you can to prepare, but you'll never replicate the speed and ferocity and talent of JMU. You can't do it. Prepare to be dominated in all 3 phases of the game. Also, the crowd will be on your ass for 60 minutes. It'll be a long afternoon for a Husky. Ooh, yeah.
Steve Brown, a legend as always. And he did it on probably less sleep than ever and after a long travel day to Atlanta. So thank you, Steve, Michael, Taylor. Appreciate it as always. And to the fans of the program, thank you as well. We had a lot of people come up to us in Atlanta and say they've been listening. We continue to see that growth. We're going to never take this for granted. And your support is why we continue to do that. So we want to say thank you. Also, again, thank you to Ethan Ratke, Cameron Starke, Harry O'Kelly, Kyle Davis. I hope this was as fun for them as it was for us. I'm going to say it again. These guys gave a lot to this program, and we're going to continue to give these former players their voice and the opportunity to share their stories because it's just great to hear the insight and what drove them and some of the funny stories which led to some of those moments. I'm never going to forget that Harry story. That's great. And seeing Mickey telling them, what it takes to win a game. That's just awesome stuff. Awesome stuff. So thanks again, guys. And we hope all of you have safe travels as you make your way up to Harrisonburg for the game against UConn. As always, we'll be back next Sunday at 8 p.m. for our recap of that. We'll look forward as well to the game against Appalachian State. And as always, we end every episode with Go Dukes, and we'll talk to you next week as the Dukes wrap up and head towards Appalachian State. Good night, everyone.